everybody, welcome back. My name is Cassie. I am the Evil Secret Ninja, and I do book reviews and talk about books on my channel. And today I am doing my wrap-up for the month of September. So these are all the books I read in September. So I finished 32 books in September. So I had a good reading month. Of those, 12 of them were physical books, 9 of them were ebooks, and 11 of them were audiobooks. 20 of those were adult books, 7 of those were young adult, and 4 of them, I guess, wouldn't really have a age group, and one of them was a children's picture book. Of those, 16 were fantasy, 4 of them were science fiction, there was 1 cookbook, 1 historical fiction, 2 nonfiction, 1 mystery thriller, 1 horror novel, 1 art book. One of them, like I said, was a kid's picture book. One was a contemporary, and one of them was a spy novel, so a spy thriller, and 2 of them were mangas. So I'm just going to kind of go through and talk about them, starting from my least favorite to my favorite. So first I'll talk about the Well of Ascension. This one is a reread, so I'm not it still counts as reading a book. It's just that it's, I'm not putting it on like these are my best or worst books of the month. Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite fantasy authors. I think he writes really great stories, and this is a fantasy about, based around the consumption of metals that give you certain abilities. So now I'll kind of get into the books that I read and got through, and kind of starting with my least favorite and going up to my favorite. I have to say, like, there wasn't any books that I hated this month. There were some that was just, yeah, that was okay, but for the most part they were fine. So we'll start with my least favorite, and that was Deadly Waters by Hutchinson, and this was a mystery thriller about this college campus where there's a lot of assaults and things going on against women, and there's someone who decides they want to fight back, so all of the boys that have a reputation, she is taking them into, I guess, the woods so that alligators can eat them. I feel like there was a little bit of misinformation about alligators and like how they function and stuff like that. Overall, it was just okay. I gave it 4.5 out of 10 stars. I thought it was a little bit much. It seemed like every male in that book was a horrible person, and it's always nice to have kind of a mix that, yeah, they're not all horrible people. You know, there are some really good men out there, and so I don't like it when it's completely polarized. The next one, this was a cookbook. It was a salad cookbook. The 365 recipes for every day of the year for making salad. And I gave that one 5 out of 10. I guess I just felt like there was too many repeated recipes in it. And that was by Georgiana Branson. The next one was Understanding Drugs of Abuse, The Process of Addiction Treatment and Abuse by Min Landry. And I gave this one 5 out of 10 stars, and I think that's mainly just because it's a little outdated and doesn't have the best updated information. It was written in 1993, so this was kind of before the opioid epidemic became such a big problem. The next one was called No Mercy by John Gilstrap, and this was the spy novel, and it was the first one in the Jonathan Grave series. Well, it didn't have an annoying romance. It was okay. This wasn't my favorite, and I gave it 5 out of 10 stars. The next book that I read was Protect the Prince by Jennifer Estep, and this is the second book in the Crown of Shards series, which I thought was kind of categorized under young adult, but there were certainly some things in it that put it on like the borderline between young adult and adult, if there is such a line. And I gave this one 5.5 out of 10 stars, and I think the main and only reason that I rated it so low was because of the trope of I'm lying to you in order to protect you. And I really don't like it when they do that. I don't like it in movies. I don't like it in books. It's not romantic. It's not nice. You're not lying to protect them. You're lying to protect yourself. You know, in those instances, people that tell themselves that, and I just don't like it in books, especially when it turns out so well all the time. Like, oh yeah, of course I forgive you because you're lying to protect me. In real life, that's not how it works. Without that trope, it would have been a lot better. The next one on the list was Clay's Arc by Octavia Butler, and that is the third book in the Pattern Master series, and I kind of felt like this one had the same theme as the first two books, but it was completely different, as in the books are doing like some kind of strange breeding program. The first two were about immortals who were trying to create children with special abilities, and this one is more disease or a parasite from outer space that's kind of doing the same thing. So I'm wondering if the fourth book will kind of wrap it all up. I gave this one 6 out of 10 stars. Honestly, the idea is just so different that I just want to figure out. I just want to know what happens next. The next one was 5 Tribes by Brian Nelson. This is the second book in the Course of the Empire. This is a science fiction about nanocytes and little miniature robots that you can use to kill people or make people sick or do whatever you want, manipulate people's DNA, all that kind of fun stuff. And it's kind of like an arms race for this new technology. And I gave that one 6 out of 10 stars. The next book is The Alienist by Caleb Carr. This is the first book in the Dr. Laszlo Kressler series. This is a historical fiction about a psychologist in the 1890s. I gave this book 7 out of 10 stars. I did enjoy it. It had kind of this idea, like the first female detective. I just felt that, considering like when this book is supposed to have taken place, it was a little bit too progressive. That I think when I read historical fiction, I want things to be more true and accurate to the time period. And I mean, there is some progressive stuff, like, hey, the first female detective, the first kind of look at a serial killer and can we use this new method to catch a serial killer. I just thought that there was a little bit too much of being progressive or progressive ideas. I think there would be sometimes things in this time period that would not have, it just wasn't the way things were. Like, even the people who were trying to reform mental health and make it more humane were not as progressive as they were put in this book. So I would have liked to be a little bit more true to things that happen in history. But overall, it was okay. The next one was The Bird Box by Josh Malerman, and this is the first book in the Bird Box series, and this follows a woman and her children as they're trying to get away from some type of creature that if you look at it, you will go crazy and kill yourself and possibly everyone else around you. So they have to go around blindfolded. Thought it was an interesting idea. It was okay. I gave it 7 out of 10 stars. The next one is Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, and this is a young adult fantasy. This is the first book in this Something Dark and Holy series. This is about a girl who can talk to the gods, and she can do magic because the gods give her powers, and she is fighting against the people who use blood magic, who use their blood to cast magic. I have to say, like, it was based on like the young adult fantasy that I've read. This was actually a little bit different. The people that I thought were going to end up in a relationship didn't, but it's still early. It's the first book in the series. It could still happen. And so I did like that it was a little bit different than what I'm used to. But I certainly can see some of the tropes coming out. And I gave that 7 out of 10 stars. The next book was The Wandering Inn, Book 3, Part 1, Flowers of Elessum by Pirataba. And this is, it's one of those kind of newer fantasies where people level up So there's several people from our world who get transported into this magical world, and it just follows them. It's kind of like reading a D&D campaign. They go into dungeons and fight monsters, and you have your heroes, and you have the main characters, Erin Solstice, who runs the Wandering Inn, and she's really concerned about how people act and stands up for people, and even like goblins will say, like, you can't kill goblins in my inn, that kind of stuff. So we have Erin Solstice, and then the other main character is Ryoka Griffin, who is a barefoot runner, and she delivers the mail. So she runs from city to city delivering mail. And it's really just like kind of their two characters and how they grow and develop, and then often they bring in like a third or fourth character, like, oh, this person came to this world too, and this is what they're doing. And I presume they're all gonna like come together at some point, but it's very slow moving because this is a very long series. I believe it's on, like, you can read the whole thing online. So the next two are the mangas that I read this month, and that was Call Me Can't Communicate 7 and 8. And these mangas are based on a girl with a communication disorder and her friends who are trying to help her navigate the social world. I really like them. They're a lot of fun to read. I gave them both 8 out of 10 stars. The next one that I read this month was No One Cares About Crazy People, The Chaos and Heartbreak of Mental Health in America by Ron Powers. This is a nonfiction story about a man and his journey through the mental health system because he has 2 sons who are diagnosed with schizophrenia. It's pretty heartbreaking. He does go a lot into the history of how mental health and how people were treated in the mental health system in America throughout history, and I gave that one 8 out of 10 stars. The next book I read was Lux by Brandon Sanderson and Stephen Bohls, and this is the first book in the Texas Reckoners series. So the first Reckoner series I listened to, me and my kids liked it a lot. It was about a world where this star comes, this big red star, they call it Calamity. After Calamity comes, people start developing superpowers, but these superpowers corrupt them, and they all become supervillains. And the Reckoners are the humans who are fighting against the Epics, trying to get their world back. And so Lux follows a different set of Reckoners as they're going through Texas, trying to defeat the Epics there. And I gave that 8 out of 10 stars. The next book is Jean Haines' Paint Yourself Calm, Colorful Creative Mindfulness Through Watercolor by Jean Haines. This book is about using watercolor and kind of how using watercolor can be calming. And I enjoyed this book a lot. It wasn't really about like, ooh, this is how you paint better pictures or anything like that. It's just like letting watercolor like do its own thing and how calming that is for you. And of course, like, these are the paintings. They don't really have, they're kind of more abstract, obviously, and it's not really about like what it looks like, it's about how you feel about it. I would say, like, if you've never used watercolor, pick it up and give it a try. It's a lot of fun. And I gave this book 8 out of 10 stars. The next book I picked up was The King Beyond the Gate by David Gemmell. And this is the second book in the Draenei saga. And just like kind of the first one, the first third is about this preparation for this battle, them gathering troops, going from the last man standing to him gathering an army to where they're now going to have this big battle. And the battle takes place in the last third. I'm not sure if like all the books in this series follow that same pattern, but it is actually quite enjoyable. It was kind of fun to read. This takes place several years after the first book. I gave this 8.5 out of 10 stars. So the next 2 books were by David Farland. These are Rune Lord series, books 6 and 8. 7's a little bit later in the list because I liked it a little bit more. So this is the kind of second era of the Rune Lords, where we're following the children from the first era. They're fighting to save not only their world, but all the worlds. and to say like it's not ending well at this point. 8 was the last one. These two I gave 8.5 out of 10 stars, but you know, to avoid spoilers, I'm not going to go too much into what goes on in those books. The magic system in it is that if you want to be better at something, you can someone can give you an attribute. Like if you want to run faster, someone can give you their stamina or their metabolism so that you can do something better. Someone can give you their beauty so that you're more beautiful, but someone has to give that up, and they have to live their lives without that attribute until one or the other of you dies. You cannot take it back. So I did finish like all the books in that series and enjoyed them. I think there's another one coming out soon, and that will be interesting because I want to see how it ends. I will say that these ones certainly have like a middle book feel, which is probably why I didn't rate them quite as high as book 7, although 7 kind of did too. I just kind of wish that they could have just combined them. It's not like they were super long or anything, and it would have been just fine. The next book was The Heart of What Was Lost by Tad Williams. This is the prequel to The Last King of Ostenard, which is a continuation after Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I will be picking up the book 1 in the series soon. This follows some of the characters from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and this is directly after the events of Green Angel Tower. I gave this one 8.5 out of 10 stars. So the next ones are all of the 3 books in the Elder Empire C trilogy by Will Wight, and we had Of Sea and Shadow. Of Sea and Shadow I gave 8.5 stars. Of Dawn and Darkness, which was book 2, and I gave that one 8.5 out of 10 stars. And Of Kings and Killers, and I gave that one 9 out of 10 stars. This series is about these humans living on this world, and there are these things that they call elders, which are kind of like gods, although some people like worship them, and some people are like, hey, these entities are super evil, and we need to avoid them and stay away from them at all costs. And the elders are kind of trying to break free, and they're using people to do that. Some of the elders will work with people, some of them don't. But we also have like these. So the elders are not necessarily working in people's best interest. There's all sorts of fun and interesting creatures in here. There's a Leviathan that our main character uses to pull his ship around, and it's this giant sea creature. That giant sea creature, but it's obviously he got it from a deal that he made with an elder before he understood like what they were. And I enjoyed this series. It had a nice wrap up. There is a companion series that I will be picking up in October, hopefully, if I get around to them. After that, I put the 7th book from the Rune Lord series, and this was The Wyrmling Horde by David Farland. This one I gave 9 out of 10 stars. I'm not really going to go into it because I already talked about the series before. The next book was The Furies of Calderon. This is the first book in the Codex Alera series by Jim Butcher, and this follows, I believe this whole series was written on a dare that you couldn't write a good story about the Roman Empire and Pokemon. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the next book. We're following Tavi, who is a boy who doesn't have a Fury, which is like an elemental companion that will help you with certain things and do things for you. And he wants one, but he hasn't been able to get one. Village and his country is coming under attack, and he's trying to find a way out of it. Okay, the next one was Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward. This is the first book in the Legacy trilogy. This is a kind of a very political intrigue type of story. There's this country, and for the most part, the great houses have not like lived in harmony, but they kind of respect each other's boundaries. But there's been little skirmishes But now, as their children are getting older, their children are starting to say, like, hey, I want more. And so now they're starting to break out into wars and different things like that. I enjoyed that one. I gave that 9 out of 10 stars. The next one was I Go Quiet by David Ouimet. And this is just a children's picture book about an introvert. And I thought it really showed, like, being an introvert and what it's like for them and how they see the world and how they kind of shy away from things. But they have really big ideas. I gave it 9.5 out of 10 stars. The next one was My Dark Vanessa by Elizabeth K. Russell. This was a very disturbing book about a girl who was being manipulated, molested by one of her teachers when she was 15, and now, so it has like a dual from the past and the present. So this happened when she was 15, and now 15 years later, things are starting to come out that this teacher, that she wasn't the only one that was abused by this teacher, and she's trying to come to terms with what happened to her and defining like what happened to her, as the other victims are kind of seeking her out and asking her for her help. It was rather disturbing. It certainly, you could see the manipulation and everything that was going on, and how this teacher really manipulated her a lot and used her and abused her. And I gave that one 9.5 out of 10 stars. The next one was The Crown Tower by Michael J. Sullivan. This was the first book in the Rhaeria Chronicles. This is how Hadrian and Royce met, and how they were sent to do a task that was supposed to bring them closer together. I guess this is important for all the other books and all the other series that have these two people in them. So it was great. Gave it 10 out of 10 stars. The next book was Shadow Rise by Tad Williams. This is the third book in the Shadow March series. There's one more book in the series. This one was my favorite out of the series so far. And this one follows a set of twins. They are trying to save their country. There's some of the Fae who are coming to take over the country. Because there was a war between them and the Fae at some point, and the Fae lost, and so the Fae ran off, and now they've decided they want their land back, and they're coming back to get it. But they are also under attack by people who are trying to overthrow their kingdom. This series is a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot. I gave this book 10 out of 10 stars. And the last book, and this was hard to say that this was my favorite, because between Crown Tower, Shadow Rise, and this one, but I think maybe I like this one just a little bit more. And that was Wolf by Ryan Grodin. This is the first book in the Wolf by Wolf series, and this is a historical fiction, science fiction kind of mixture, where if Hitler had won World War II, and now one of his human experiments has decided that she's going to come after him and assassinate him. Because so many people have tried to assassinate Hitler, she only has one chance to do that. And so she has to win this contest, because it's the only time that they know he is ever seen in public. I kind of put that as number one, but it was a really hard pick because there were so many great books I read this month. So those are all the books that I read in September. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.